The original. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. The big upon us. This is the Eminent Sports Broadcasting Network. And I'm your host, Classic. Yes, the big day is upon us. Errol Spence Jr. versus Yordenis Ugas for the Unified Welterweight Championship of the World on a stacked pay-per-view card. This looks like one of the best card so far this year on paper in terms of the value of what you're going to be getting for the entire day. It's going to be interesting. There is quite a few welterweight implications on this card. I wouldn't say that there's going to be clarity because at the top of the division, we know who the top dogs are in the division. And there's going to be a lot of sub bosses fighting for their positions. So there's going to be somewhat more clarity, but of course, there's going to be clarity at the top. You got Errol Spence, the IBF and the WBC welterweight champion, sporting a record of 27-0 with 21 KOs, going up against Cuban sensation Yordenis Ugas, who's sporting a record of 27-4 with 12 KOs, coming off the biggest win of his career, knocking off the legend Manny Pacquiao. There's only one other fight that would make this a more interesting day. And of course, that would be Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford. But that would not make sense. That fight has to be for undisputed. All the marbles, winner takes all. That's if Errol Spence gets through Yordenis Ugas, and I'm pretty sure Errol Spence would be the one with the rematch clause. So if things was to go left, I'm pretty sure that's what we'd be getting next. But let's talk about this fight a little bit. Errol Spence coming off a car accident where he's lucky to be alive, then coming off a detached retina right before he was supposed to fight Manny Pacquiao. Yordenis Ugas gets that opportunity, and he makes good with that opportunity. In 3+ years, Errol Spence has fought one time. And me being a huge Errol Spence fan, it helps that he's Jamaican. I'm Jamaican, Spanish Town, Jamaica, big ups. When he first got into that accident, I do remember, man, I was hurting for him. And I was looking very much forward to what Errol Spence was going to be displaying as his career moved forward. And I was very concerned that we weren't going to get that opportunity. Now, when he fought Danny Garcia, he didn't look the same in my eyes, but he was able to dominate a Danny Garcia where he was clearly not 100%. But as time has progressed, and we've seen him in training and in sparring and in workouts and even in his speech, the way he delivers his communication to the public has gotten a lot better. Now, when he's saying he's 100%, and he seems like he's very, very stern on that, I got to take his word for it. Very confident man, very confident fighter, taking on big challenges. And I commend him for that. Love you, dog. Now, Yordenis Ugas ain't nothing to play with. I was thinking Manny Pacquiao was going to start this guy based on the great fighter that Manny Pacquiao was. Ordered that pay-per-view, watched it, and I was very impressed with Yordenis Ugas, the way how he controlled Manny Pacquiao in the middle of that ring. It was very, very impressive. His stock rose with that performance. But let's take a look at this chessboard, this welterweight chessboard, where it seems like the PBC and Al Heyman has in a chokehold, or I should say in a headlock. The fighters at the top of the graphic are fighters that are not advised by Mr. Heyman and fighters that fight on other platforms. The fighters on the bottom of the graphic are the fighters that are either advised by him or simply just fight on his platform, which would be the PBC. Let's start at the top. Mr. Virgil Ortiz. He was supposed to have a fight recently, and he had to bow out of that fight because of an illness. How severe that illness was, I'm not sure. I didn't really look into it too much. I was gonna tune in for that fight, but once he fell out, that card lost a lot of luster. I was not gonna tune in for the Blair Flair, or at least there was no urgency to watch that card. So his co-promoter, Mr. Bernard Hopkins, suggested that Virgil Ortiz is gonna have to move up. He suggested that he move up. He think he'll be a stronger fighter at junior middleweight. So is that where his future lies? Only time will tell. You have Conor Benn, fighter out of England, son to Nigel Benn, former world champion. Conor Benn looks like he's the goods. Definitely looks like he's the goods. But he hasn't fought anyone. He hasn't fought anyone that was a threat at all. I was looking at his highlights the other day. I was on the DAZN app on my television, and it was showing some Conor Benn highlights. He was knocking out a lot of dudes, man. A lot of Caucasian dudes. I'm not trying to say nothing that's awkward or nothing like that. Not trying to bring race into it, but these guys didn't look like they were real fighters, man. These guys that Conor Benn was starching. So I'm looking for him to step up, man. I know he has a fight the same night as the Errol Spence. Actually, yeah, the same night as the Errol Spence fight, but his is during the day. So it'll be in the AM, and it'll be in the early PM hours on the East Coast time. And I think he's fighting Chris Van Heerden. Chris Van Heerden, if you can memory recalls, is a fighter that Errol Spence stopped. He's a fighter that Jaron Ennis was supposed to fight for that IBO belt when it was vacant. That would have been a nice look for Mr. Ennis. I mean, the IBO belt is a belt that no one really seeks for, no one really strives for. But why not? Why not have it? Why not hold it? Why not have that be a part of the journey to undisputed? I'm shocked that none of these fighters have ever tried to fight for that belt. None of the top dogs. Maybe they're just looking at the sanctioning fees like it's not worth it. I mean, Triple G holds that belt. Anthony Joshua held that belt. The Klitschko's held that belt. So what's going to happen if that belt becomes officially one of the major belts in the sport of boxing? I would think that if you were holding on to that belt and you became undisputed, we'd be able to, you know what I'm saying, put an asterisk on it and say, hey, you were one of the champions that was a champion in the 5 belt era. You did it before it was official. But that's neither here nor there. The current IBO champion, and I'm gonna butcher this guy's name, so I mean, forgive me. He's from Kazakhstan, and his name is Yelusinov. Yelesun. I think I did it right. Yelusinov. Let's go with that. Has a record of 11-0 with 6 KOs. Unproven. Hasn't fought anyone really that I've known. Seen a few highlights of his. He has some skills, but against limited competition. So, I mean, he has the belt. He has the IBO belt, so he has to be on this board, correct? I would think so. You got David Avanesian. David Avanesian is a fighter that has a record of 29-3-1 with 17 KOs, and I think one of his losses was a KO loss. He was supposed to fight Conor Benn for some European title, and that never happened. And I think I know why. Because he's a threat. They don't want to derail this fighter. They want to procrastinate and wait and see when one of these major belts will become vacant. Will Conor Benn fight Virgil Ortiz if he remains in his division? Will he fight Terrence Crawford right now? Would he fight Keith Thurman? Would he fight Drawn Ennis? Would he fight Butayev, Errol Spence, or Yordenis Ugas? Or even Stanionis? Would he? I don't know. Eddie Hearn doesn't seem like he's ready for those challenges. It seems like he's very content with, oh, 2, 3 more fights. 2, 3 more fights. Then he'll be ready. But let's see. I'm not trying to down on Conor Benn. I think the world of him. I think he's a supreme talent. I like what I see from him in his very mature stage of his career. But let's see what the future holds for him. Now, a fight that I'm looking forward to on this day of boxing is going to be this Stanionis and Butayev fight for the WBA regular. Now, Stanionis is the #1 contender for the WBA Super Championship. And he took step aside money and he decided to fight a strong fighter, in my opinion, in Butayev. Yordenis Ugas was ordered to fight Stanionis, and they were able to negotiate and get the Errol Spence fight instead, which makes more sense. Now, Stanionis going up against Butayev, very dangerous. Remember, Butayev took the strap off of Jamal James in a very clear victory. And he's a strong fighter. Stanionis is a pretty strong fighter too. He has to have confidence for him to take this fight, knowing that he's in position for the super belt. So, two fighters that are very, very confident in their abilities. Damn, sign me up for that. 50-50 fight, maybe. Let's see. Maybe this is gonna be the star, the telecast. This is gonna be the fight that a lot of people are gonna remember. Maybe. Let's see. Let's go back to the top of the board, man. You got the killer. Let's not pretend that we don't know who this killer is. It's Mr. Terrence Crawford. Mr. Terrence Crawford is the WBO welterweight champion. He's knocked out every single opponent that he's fought in the division. Terrence Crawford sports a record of 38-0 with 29 KOs. He knocked off the fighter. His name is escaping me at the moment. The fighter that beat Manny Pacquiao for that belt. Jeff Horn. A lot of people thought Manny Pacquiao got robbed in that fight. These are a lot of people with delusion in their brains. They are starstruck by certain fighters, and they feel like certain fighters of a certain ilk shouldn't get the nod in when it comes to certain fights. You know how to score a boxing match. In my opinion, that was a clear fight to score. I'm not gonna say he beat Manny Pacquiao by 4 or 5 rounds or nothing like that, but it was obvious that Jeff Horn was the winner in that fight. Terrence Crawford starched him to take that belt, and anyone that's been in the ring with him, he's stopped. He's a dog, man. And if Errol Spence gets through Yordenis Ugas, I think it only makes sense for him to sign with the PBC, because not only does Mr. Al Heyman have the welterweight division in a stranglehold, he also has the junior middleweight division in a stranglehold. And that's the weight class that Terrence Crawford is saying that he would like to move up to after this, after he feels as if he dominates and becomes undisputed. He's going to want to move up to the next weight class and challenge for those belts. All those fighters are on the PBC as well, man. Like, I don't know. I think it's negotiations. Errol Spence wins this fight. There's only one fight to make. That makes all the sense in the world. Your negotiating powers will be a lot stronger at that time, I would think. Also on this board, you have the welterweight phenom in many people's eyes, Mr. Yordenis, who's gearing up to fight Clayton on the Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano undercard for the undisputed junior middleweight super welterweight championship. Going to be an interesting night of fights as well when that time arrives. I think the world of Yordenis, man. Strong fighter. Fundamentals, man. His skills are impeccable. Good jab, good movement, lots of power, very confident. And no one seems to want to fight him. Only the bottom tier fighters are willing to fight him to collect a good payday. But no one with a strong name has been willing to step in the ring with this man, because low risk. I mean, high risk, low reward, right? He poses a big threat to any fighter coming up, or any fighter in a position where they feel like they're knocking on the door. Why take on a Yordenis? I think he's going to look very impressive when he fights Clayton coming up in a few weeks. As a fight, I'm also looking forward to. You have Mr. Keith Thurman, former unified champion, a fighter that Errol Spence says he will never fight. That's a big fight. But the fight that makes sense, in my opinion, to build the Errol Spence fight even a little more, would be Terrence Crawford versus Keith Thurman on a big pay-per-view. I would do that fight, because the winner of the Stanionis and Butayev fight, is it going to become the mandatory? Are they going to step aside again, or are they going to position themselves to fight for those belts. Interesting times. It's going to be a big step aside check to get one of these guys to fall back, I would think. So if you were able to get Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford at the end of the year, or whoever comes out as the winners in these fights, would you be opposed to Terrence Crawford versus Keith Thurman in the middle of the year, and possibly Errol Spence versus either Butayev or Stanionis in a mandatory position, or even a Ugas? Listen, I don't want to disrespect Ugas and just make it seem like he's just gonna lose this fight. It's a tough fighter, man. I do feel like Errol Spence is the better fighter. I feel as if he has turned the corner from his injuries, and I feel like he's gonna win the fight. But like I said, Ugas ain't no slouch. I mean, there's a lot of fights to be made in this division, man, and I know people, me and as well. I want to see Spence versus Crawford, but there's plenty of good fights to be made before we get that fight. I don't think we need to marinate it anymore. I think it's ready, it's ripe, it's ready to go. But are the other fighters in their positions going to be willing to step aside and allow that to move forward? Everybody has a price. Also fighting, you got Cody Crowley. He's sporting a record of 20-0 with 9 KOs. Mr. Crowley is a fighter from Canada, and he just recently knocked off the IBF #1 challenger. I think he was the man in the mandatory position. Kukarov, I think is how you pronounce this guy's name. And Cody Crowley knocked him off pretty easily. I wasn't impressed with this guy at all. There was no way that fight was ever going to be made between him and Errol Spence. Errol Spence would never want to take a fight like that, and his actions show that. Now, I'm not going to call out the fighters that would take a fight like that for a big payday. They know, we know who they are because they've proven it. They've done it. They're in the position of power. They're the major players in the game, and they take mandatory fights of lesser fighters that have no business in the ring with them. Errol Spence has made it clear that that's not the business that he's in. He wants the top fights. He wants the big challenges. So Cody Crowley is going to be fighting the Riverside Rocky, Josecito Lopez, who was supposed to fight, I think, on the Keith Thurman undercard, right? And he had to bow out because of injury. So how that fight's going to go? I mean, what kind of Josecito Lopez are we going to get in that fight? It's been a while since he's fought. He looked very impressive against Keith Thurman. I think that was a one-sided fight. A lot of people like to make these weird proclamations as if that fight was closer than it actually was. It's the same thing with the Yordenis Ugas and Sean Porter fight. Sean Porter won that fight. Sean Porter outlanded Ugas in that fight, round after round after round. He showed ring generalship as well as Yordenis Ugas. He commanded his position. He was able to hit Sean Porter with some clean shots, but Sean Porter was able to get in on him and land more shots per round than Yordenis Ugas. A lot of people seem to be very perplexed with who won that fight. I'm not one of those guys. I think Sean Porter won that fight. And I also think Sean Porter beat Keith Thurman in a close fight as well and didn't get the decision in that situation either. I mean, he got the decision in the Yordenis Ugas, which was right. I thought he won the fight, but I thought he beat Keith Thurman as well in a very very close fight, 1 or 2 rounds. Keith Thurman got the nod. He was the bigger name. It was a very close fight. Maybe I was wrong, but I've watched it 2 or 3 times and I scored the same all 3 times. And I think my scoring criteria is pretty impeccable. But yeah, man. So we got this welterweight chessboard, and a lot of these faces are gonna be knocked off of this board, or maybe they'll still be in a position. They'll still be on the board, but they won't be holding the strong spots where they're in at the current state. So yeah, now back to this card now. This card that I'm looking forward to. 6 fight card, 2 fights are gonna be either on is gonna be on YouTube and Showtime. You got Brandon Lee versus Ochoa and Stanionis versus Butayev for the regular belt. And on the pay-per-view portion of the card, you're gonna have Valenzuela versus who's Valenzuela fighting? The guy named of a former champion Vargas. Pitbull Cruz is fighting Yordenis Gamboa. And then, like I said, Crowley versus Josecito Lopez. It's pretty good card, man. Should be a lot of good action because I think a lot of the fighters are evenly matched. Gamboa, what Gamboa are we gonna get? The way-in, he looked a little unmotivated. And by the way, Pitbull Cruz missed weight. Why did Pitbull Cruz miss weight? Is he not focused? Is he looking at Gamboa as food? Someone who he shouldn't, who he didn't, he's not really taking that serious? We're gonna have to find out. But anyways, we're gonna chop it up in the coming days. We're gonna let this fight marinate a little bit. We're gonna let the results marinate a little bit. You know what I mean? I have a very busy schedule this week in terms of work. So I'm looking to chop it up with you guys a little bit more on this fight card next week. I'm going to put some material together and we're going to discuss this in full detail. So have a good night, fellas. Have a good morning, ladies and gents. And let's enjoy this fight. April 16th, Errol Spence Jr. versus Yordenis Ugas. Stacked pay-per-view card. You got Conor Benn earlier on in the day fighting Van Heerden. Going to be a lot of one-sided fights over there on that zone card because that seems like that's what their specialty is nowadays, is a lot of one-sided events. A lot of A side versus Z side. So let's see what happens, man. We'll chop it up later. We'll chop it up next week. Look at some of this basketball, NBA playoffs. We talk about that as well. Have a good night. Wipe your feet when you're stepping out. Peace.